innocent hope to die.
By these 50 countries, differing so much in race and religion, in language and culture.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
Well, I know they're lying. They tricked me once, but they're not going to trick me twice. The time is now. Welcome back to the Professor Penn podcast. David Penn, your host, glad to be with you on this Thursday, July 3rd, 7:30 p.m. For episode number 218. And this episode is going to be important to me. We're going to cover 3 areas of convergence, all of which I've participated in. We're going to be talking about Jewish Zionism, Christian Zionism, and we're going to be talking about a candidate for U.S. Senate, a U.S. SEAL, former Adam Schwarze, who was recently interviewed. I want to talk about that interview in these 3 areas of military training, Jewish religious training, and evangelical Christian training. I have experienced all 3 of these areas in some depth, I do want to say, because I'm sure Adam's going to watch this. Adam, I am not a military veteran, but I did spend 22 years training with them. So I have some insight into that walk. Why are we talking about this? To be a Jewish Zionist, you have experienced a high degree of cultural training. You have a goal. You're on a mission. That mission is to restore the nation of Israel and to preserve the nation of Israel. If you are an evangelical Christian Zionist, you have a mission, which is to restore the nation of Israel and strengthen it to presage the return of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And if you are involved in the military, you are highly trained with a mission to protect and preserve the United States of America. These 3 domains have something in common, which is the commitment of the participant to the mission. In a very similar way, citizens need to be committed to preserving their freedom through self-governance and through political activity. Let's think about these 3 groups: the Jews, the evangelical Zionists, and the military members. These groups wield power that you see and occult power that you do not see. They're trained and they are good at what they do. If you look out at the United States of America and the world and you see things that you don't like a $37 trillion debt, like a war that never stops, things like that, you might consider, as I have, how these 3 groups interface with those problems and why are they able to accomplish their mission and I can't accomplish mine. And the reason is we citizens are not trained, we are not clear about the mission, and we are passive. Well, training is getting involved in the local Republican Party. That in and of itself is a kind of training. You're learning a culture. You got to show up on time. There's tasks that you have to do. What is my mission? My mission is to save the Republic of the United States and preserve its Constitution against forces that seem to want to change that to something else. That is my mission. That is my mission. So I get the training by participating in the Republican Party or in politics. I have a mission, and my job is to motivate every one of you to join me in that mission. You know, these folks that we're dealing with here, and I'm not saying they're all good or all bad, it's a mixed bag. It's like anything else. They have an agenda that they have been working for decades. They're so far out in front of the citizens, we don't even have a sense for how well developed these occult powers really are. We're just regular people, or as I like to use the word that I learned from Steve Bannon, grundoons. We're just regular folks. But these groups got an agenda, and they don't really think about what I want or what you want. Politics is about expressing your will. So if you sit on your couch and you get really upset that we're going to war again or that the debt's continuing to increase, you know, why? Just turn the television off and smoke a joint. Forget about it. Because the reason we do these podcasts is to make the news that matters clearer for me and for you. It's a learning experience for me. But to share, these are the reasons we have to be involved. These people only have power because we don't exercise our power. There is so many more regular people than there are in these subgroups, but they're trained and they're on a mission. What mission am I on? To save my country's Republican form of governance, to preserve my self-governance. I like being the sovereign of my own life. So I have joined the Republican Party. I am involved. I am involved in grassroots community organizing. I will go anywhere, anytime, any place to talk to anybody about anything because I want to build an organization here in Minnesota, and I want you to do it in your state where we can be politically effective and change the arc of history. Well, let's just play a clip. It's about 4 minutes long. Well, it's going to speak for itself. Good morning, Tanner.
Good morning.
Could you please play number 1?
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for those stirring words. To now offer a closing benediction, I'd like to call upon Pastor John Hagee, founder and senior pastor of the Cornerstone Baptist Church in San Antonio, Texas. Pastor Hagee.
Can we stand? Our most gracious Heavenly Father, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who calls the stars by name and measures space with the span of his hand, the God who is the King of the universe, we gather here today to thank you for the joy of living and seeing this glorious and historic day. We thank you for the state of Israel, the lone torch of freedom in the Middle East, who lives and prospers because of your everlasting love for the Jewish people. It was you, O Lord, who gathered the exiles from the nations and brought them home again. It was you who made statehood possible. It was you that gave a miraculous victory in 1967 when Jerusalem was reopened to worshipers of all faith. Jerusalem is the city of God. Jerusalem is the heartbeat of Israel. Jerusalem is where Abraham placed his son on the altar of the Temple Mount and became the father of many nations. Jerusalem is where Jeremiah and Isaiah penned principles of righteousness that became the moral foundations of Western civilization. Jerusalem is where Messiah will come and establish a kingdom that will never end. We thank you, O Lord, for President Donald Trump's courage in acknowledging to the world a truth established 3,000 years ago, that Jerusalem is and always shall be the eternal capital of the Jewish people. And because of that courage of our president, we gather here today to consecrate the ground upon which the United States Embassy will stand, reminding the dictators of the world that America and Israel are forever united. We thank you for our ambassador, David Friedman, and pray your anointing upon him as he opens the doors of the U.S. Embassy to receive the nations of the world. Let the word go forth from Jerusalem today that Israel lives. Shout it from the housetops that Israel lives. Let every Islamic terrorist hear this message: Israel lives. Let it be heard in the halls of the United Nations: Israel lives. Let it echo down the marble halls of the presidential palace in Iran: Israel lives. Let it be known to all men that Israel lives, because he that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. As King David prayed 3,000 years ago, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem and all its inhabitants. Let the name of the Lord be glorified today, for the defender of Israel today, tomorrow, and forever is here. Can we all shout hallelujah? Amen.
Thank you, Tanner. That was Reverend Hagee giving the closing benediction at a ceremony which marked the movement of the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That was done in the 45 presidency of Donald Trump. It's a very big deal. And if you are an evangelical follower of the Professor Penn podcast, that all makes perfect sense to you. If you are not an evangelical Zionist, you might have some questions like, how did this guy get there? Why is a American evangelical preacher giving the benediction in Jerusalem in front of a big gathering of the most important Jews in the world? Kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like counterproductive in my mind.
Well, I don't know what the word, I mean, you can have a word counterproductive. We're going to talk about, is it productive? Is it counterproductive? But it's something that people don't know a lot about.
I just don't understand it, and like maybe it's so simple that we're that I'm on elementary level, but why are Christians helping Jews if they believe in a major key factor, or they have different beliefs on a major key factor?
They agree on, it's like Ronald Reagan says, why are we arguing if we agree about 80%?
Yeah, I mean,
But the
I'm not saying I
20%,
want them to
no,
argue,
no, no, no,
but
I'm
yeah,
not finished. But the 20% they don't agree on, it's a big gap, right?
yeah.
But they do agree. And we're going to talk about why that is. It's very interesting. It's very important that we understand, because as we motivate to go into our communities and organize them, we have to find a way to come together, all of us, to create a functioning republic. I had this interview with Walter Hudson we did this past Tuesday, and it was very well received. I had people call me and say it was the best Professor Penn podcast episode they'd ever seen. And I was very happy to hear that. And I think what people expressed to me was, because they know that Walter and I don't agree about a lot of things. They know that. But what they liked was we were able to talk to each other in a very respectful and elevated way. And people are craving, I think, I hope, for dialogue. And, one of the things that's going on here is there's a Christian-Jewish dialogue, which is not new. It has very, very long and developed history, and it's important we know this history. If we don't know our history, we'll never know how we got to where we are. And if we don't know where we are, how are we going to solve our problems? And this episode is dedicated to something that I would say for most Americans is relatively not well understood. I look at X, it's full of anti-Semitism, crazy sometimes scary anti-Semitism. Okay, people don't like the Jews. And a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment is tied to what Israel is doing in Gaza. Do you agree with that comment?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Do you know that for every Jewish Zionist, there's at least 30 Christian Zionists? That there's more, 30-1 Christian Zionists to Jewish Zionists. Did you know that?
No.
We're going to talk about it tonight. And, we started out with this piece. We're going to come back to it. That speech actually encapsulated all the key events of Christian evangelical Zionism, because the evangelical Zionist belief is that before the Messiah comes back, the Jews will be ingathered into Israel. And Israel only started in 1948. And we talked about the Balfour Declaration recently. We're looking at the roots of Israel, how it was created, how it's supported, and what's really going on here. Because is Israel a nation state like Zimbabwe? Or is it, as Reverend Hagee said, Jerusalem is the capital of Jesus Christ, of God? Which is it? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Do you approach a state like Zimbabwe the same way you would approach the capital of God? Probably not.
Mm.
Probably not. So we're going to talk about that. And, it ties into so many other issues, and it's so potent. So we're going to bookmark that and come back to it because we got a lot of wood to chop tonight. I will say last week something was very uplifting for me personally in terms of my own self-governance. What is the point of working to organize your community and elect candidates of your choice, which we have to do? We got to meet our neighbors. We got to join the party. You got to join your party. You got to go to your local party committee, be part of it. You got to be a precinct committee person. That's how you take your organizational efforts into a society, into a subculture, which will train you and teach you. You'll learn there. Just like the evangelical Zionists, the Jewish Zionists, the military people, they've been trained about how to pursue their mission. You join the party, you gain skills there. Thank you, Tanner, precinctstrategy.com. You can go here. Dan Schultz has put together a great website where you can learn how to get involved in politics in your state. And we have to be involved in politics because when we're not, let's realize these people are doing politics. Again, I asked the question, how does an 80-year-old dude who has a church in Texas end up giving the benediction at the dedication of the movement of the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? How do you get that job? Doesn't that seem strange to you and rather implausible? I'm saying, how does not seem implausible that a very old evangelical preacher from Texas is in Jerusalem giving the benediction at the setup of the American Embassy in Jerusalem? Doesn't that seem odd to you? I mean, it's odd to me. Why
I'm
would
just
it?
stuck on the thing, and maybe I'm just so stupid right now, but I mean, I'm happy that we're like getting along with the Jewish people. It's great and all, but how in the world are the Christians helping when the Jewish people killed the Messiah? Like, I just don't understand how they're so
Great.
kumbaya.
I wonder how many people are asking themselves that question. And, for the Stu Peters of the world, the really rabid anti-Semites that have a huge following, what do they think of these Christians? Because these people are spirit-filled Christians, and I'm going to tell you, I know it because I've done it. That's an interesting thing about me tonight. I've spent 22 years training, and I'm going to say this again, I'm not a veteran. I was not deployed into any foreign war zones. I have great respect for the people that I did because I trained with these people for 22 years. So I understand it. I trained in Orthodox Judaism. I understand it pretty well. But you're going to be surprised by this, but this evangelical Christianity, I spent a good part of my life immersed in it. And I'm going to tell a quick story, and then we're going to get to the news that matters. I got sick when I was 26 years old. And when I say sick, I don't mean a cold. I mean sick. And, when you get sick when you're young like that, it's emotionally very taxing. You get sick at 70, you go, hey, time's up. Some people are going to go, let me out. I'm ready to go. But when you're 26, I hadn't even had children yet, and my life was just getting started. And I was terribly ill. I mean, I got a disfiguring skin condition. And when I say disfiguring, it was on my face. I couldn't go out. I mean, it was bizarre. I had something that was not diagnosable, and there was no treatment for it, and it was disfiguring. And then I got sicker and sicker, and I ended up with the disease called Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer, a lymphatic cancer, and I had various diagnoses between I got a 10% chance of dying in 5 years to I got a 50% chance of dying in 5 years. And at 26, even 10% doesn't sound real happy. And I was going to an Orthodox synagogue at the time, wearing a yarmulke. I didn't drive on the Sabbath, and I lived a long way from the synagogue, so it was quite a deal to walk there. In other words, I was living as a religious Jew, and I went to my rabbi and I said, "Rabbi, I have a serious problem. The doctor can't fix my skin disease, and I could die of this lymphoma. And is there any special Jewish remedy for such problems?" Thinking there was some magic. Because after all, there is. I knew it was there. I just didn't know it. And he gave me a very long pamphlet that was in Yiddish. And that was a difficult lift for me at the time to read that. And I will translate for you what the long pamphlet said. Are you ready?
Ready.
Do whatever your doctor tells you to do.
You
And
had a
I
joker
said,
for a doctor.
I'm out. These folks are not helping me survive, because culture is about survival, right? I mean, we do culture, we involve ourselves in culture because it enhances our longevity. And I wasn't getting the answer I wanted, so I just said, this isn't working for me. To make a very long story short, and I've talked about some of the very supernatural things that happened to me along that road, I ended up discovering another Texas preacher he's dead now. I'm sure Reverend Hagee was probably 40 when I was dealing with this Texas preacher. His name was Reverend Kenneth Hagin. Reverend Kenneth Hagin. And if you have, I'm going to tell you right now, if you have an incurable or a serious medical condition, this is how deep I was into this. And I haven't thought about this for years. In fact, I just thought about this morning coming to the studio to talk about it. There's two Kenneth Hagins. There's a senior and a junior. I don't pay any attention to junior. Senior was, I can testify, was a baller. And he preached healing through faith. And that's what I was looking for when I went to the rabbi. And the rabbi told me to listen to my doctor. And my doctor was telling me 70 treatments of radiation, major surgery, and chemotherapy. And that didn't sound very good to me. So I went to Reverend Hagin's church. And while I did still have some treatment, I didn't have surgery. I had half the radiation, and I didn't have any chemotherapy. And I've been asymptomatic since I'm 30 years old. So was that a miracle, or was I lucky? I have reality testing. I'm not going to tell you that I was healed by Jesus Christ, because I don't know for sure. But at the time when I was dying, I gave that everything I have. And that's why I am so familiar when I say I've read Mark and Matthew 1,000 times. That's how I got there, because there's a healing ministry in that book. And I used it. And that's why I have quite a bit of insight into the evangelical Christian walk by faith and not by sight concept. And it's powerful. And if you do have a problem, I'm going to say, see your doctor. Don't give up going to your doctor. But you might want to discover Reverend Kenneth Hagin Sr., because he has a great insight into spiritual healing. And if you think about it scientifically, it's a little reductionistic to think that things happen biomolecular at a biomolecular level that don't involve anything else. And that's the kind of science in healing that they teach in medical schools. They teach a very biomolecular approach to disease and disease mitigation. Uh, we're going to look back on that at some point in the future like it's leeches. We're just not there yet. Anyhow, I have experience with the Christian evangelical way, and if you're listening to me and you're an evangelical Christian, I practice this. I don't, so I can talk about it. I'm not coming at it as a critic. I'm coming at it as a participant, just as I am as being Jewish, for example. But Reverend Hagen didn't talk about Israel. I never heard him preach on the Jews, on Israel, talked about Jesus Christ, talked about preparing yourself because you don't know the hour, talked about putting sin underfoot if you want to be well, if you want to have it be well with you, because God can't operate in your life if you're given over to sin. Sin means separation, after all. It's the separation between man and God. The story in Genesis when that apple was eaten, that separated humanity from our Creator. And the entire process is about reconciliation, not of God to man, but of man to God. And we're going full speed in the wrong direction right now. That's why we need to get organized in our neighborhoods. And we need to be able to talk to all these different people that we have to meet and greet and love and build a political community with. And when you go into the party, there's lots of Christian evangelical members in the party. And I didn't understand that when I saw Mary Amlow waving that Israeli flag. I go, what do you got my flag for? What you doing? Well, I don't know that she's a Christian evangelical. She might not be. But there are many Christian evangelical uh, people in Minnesota and in your state that support the nation of Israel because their preachers have told them the story of the return of Christ and how the Jews play an important role in that from their perspective, from their street corner. It's not the only street corner. It's the street corner of the Christian evangelicals. I'm going to tell you, Christian evangelicals, the Jews got a different picture on this. They just don't tell you about it because they love the support, okay? I'm going to say this as an insider in the Jewish community. They don't agree with this story that the Reverend Hagee is believing and preaching. They don't agree with it at all. Not at all. But they just don't tell you. And they're not going to give up their beliefs without a supernatural event. And for those of you who know the scripture, there's 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe of Israel that are going to be preserved, the remnant, to preach the gospel to Jews. The idea being, and I've said this, and I've said this over and over again, and I never really connected it to the evangelical message, but I've said this several times on the podcast. Who is going to recognize the Messiah? A Satanist? Yeah, they're going to recognize it and fight against it. But a person that has no faith is not going to recognize God. They're not going to understand or see miracles. Who is going to recognize God and miracles are people that have faith. Jewish people have faith. You might not like hearing it, but Muslim people have faith. Christian people have faith. We are the inheritors of Abraham's faith in the one true God, what they call the Abrahamic religions. So we need to understand this. We need to understand its influence of these three groups: military veterans, Jewish Zionists, and Christian Zionists. They have great influence over our political process and over our foreign policy. And in a time when the MAGA movement is all in on ending the forever war, we have to understand how these groups have been raised up in their traditions, in their cultures, to think about globalism and the forever war. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But first, I want to tell you, I was heartened last week. The Supreme Court issued a ruling which um, ended federal judges in the circuits from issuing nationwide injunctions. So the federal judges can still stop President Trump's agenda, but that stoppage, that injunction, that's what an injunction is, it stops something, will now be limited and not nationwide. That's a big change, and it ends the tyranny, doesn't end it, but it retards and truncates the tyranny of activist judges who are working to prevent President Trump from accomplishing his missions. And I will say on a sidebar, you got to know an activist attorney to understand who these people are. These people went into the law as radicals. They don't like the Republic of the United States. They are opposed to the form of governance called republicanism. They are communists in black robes. And if you're going to say prove it, I don't need to prove it to you. I look at their actions and I have a different definition for myself about communism. I know it is indicative of an economic form of organization, but that's just part of its ideology. A very big part of its ideology is that there is no God, that everything is material. That's why it's so economically focused. And these judges are not believers, in my opinion. In my opinion, they are, and I've known a lot of them. Again, why did I have all these experiences? I don't know why. My mother's one of these people. She went into the law because she wanted to take the system down. She was a radical in the 60s, and she went into the Democrat Party, and she got very disappointed because the Democrat Party, hey, it's like the Republican Party. If you're in there on a pure mission, with a pure heart, whether your heart is black or light, but you're on a pure mission, you want to accomplish real change, you find out real quick the parties are on the payroll of something else. So my mom freaked out. She realized she couldn't make that kind of change through party participation. So she went to law school, and she told me, the words came out of her mouth, I'm going into the system to break it and change it to what she wanted. And she did a lot here in Minnesota. One lawyer on a mission, that's a secret society, the law. You're trained in the law. You've heard that. Go to law school to get trained in the law. The law, what is the law? It's a weapon of words. We have an adversarial system. And instead of dueling it out with swords or guns, they duel it out with legal arguments. And then the judges really hold sway and make the decisions about what argument prevails or not, because they can control what is allowed into evidence. The judges, powerful. And the Supreme Court, again, judges, remove the power from the lower court judges to stop on a nationwide basis with an injunction the Trump agenda or any agenda that comes up down the road. This bar door swings both ways. If we get a Democrat president or a communist president or whatever it may be downstream, and we get some Republican judge that was appointed by President Trump, let's just say, his injunction will also be limited in scope instead of nationwide. So, you got to understand how the game plays. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. All right, that's a big deal. Another big deal, a very powerful, the Grand Ayatollah of Shia Islam, Ayatollah Nasser Makarem Shirazi, issued a fatwa this past weekend declaring the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, as quote-unquote enemies of God, and called on Muslims worldwide to kill them. The fatwa, which holds religious and legal authority within Shia Islam, was published in response to a theological inquiry requiring what action should be taken in the face of statements by foreign figures threatening the life of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and the country's religious hierarchy. In his response, Makarem Shirazi described these individuals as moharib, meaning enemies of God, a grave designation in Islamic law that justifies retaliation. You'll like this. Here's a quote. Any person or regime who threatens the supreme leader or religious authority must be considered an enemy of God. It is the duty of all Muslims to make them repent for their actions. If these Muslims suffer any harm during that effort, they will receive the reward of martyrs in the path of God. That is a declaration of war at the neighborhood level. This is why we need to organize our neighborhoods. Meanwhile, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei congratulated Iranians for what he called a victory over Israel and the United States. In a defiant video message, it was his first statement publicly since the U.S. bombed 3 of the country's nuclear facilities. Khamenei said the attack did not gain anything and added that Iran gave America a severe slap in the face. Well, okay. I'll take any day of peace, even if it's just a period of rearmament. And the peace is short-lived. Since I saw you last, Israel has unleashed its biggest airstrikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon in many, many months. It's a giant escalation. And who is Hezbollah? They are on the payroll of the Iranians. They're Shias who control Lebanon. And as you can see, this war is ongoing. This war is ongoing. That's why we're going to talk about military veterans in politics, Jewish Zionists in politics, and Christian Zionists in politics, and how this all works together when the MAGA movement is committed to bringing an endless war to an end. And we saw that gap opening up in the Republican right side of the football when the drums of war were pounding for the United States to intervene into this war with Iran, and Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson and many of the ideological thought leaders of the movement said stop. And you had the Lindsey Grahams, for example, and he wasn't alone. The Tom Tillises, there's just a cast of these people that are Ted Cruz, for example, that are committed to Israel. And we, so, well, what's going on here? Why is this? As Tanner so aptly shared, why are these folks so supportive of the people they believe killed Christ? That's a pretty honest question.
Yeah, I don't mean it any certain way. It's just it boggles my mind. Even in the movies, you don't see people getting along like that.
There's 30 Christian Zionists for every Jewish Zionist, 30 to 1. We're going to talk about it. But I got to move quick. Today. There's a big agenda. NATO has okayed a massive increase in military spending. Most of the countries are going to 5% of GDP. That'd be like going from 1% to 5%. That's a big increase because Donald Trump is telling them, stand on your own, boys, self-govern. If you don't want to protect your freedom, don't expect the United States of America to be doing it. There's some holdouts like Canada and Spain, and President Trump wasn't happy with Spain for saying that they were not going to get to 5%. Trump complained, quote unquote, there's a problem with Spain. Spain is not agreeing, which is very unfair to the rest of them, frankly. And because we're involved in all kinds of trade negotiations, Donald Trump has told them that if they don't frog up, he's going to tax them. And along those lines, moving right into the economy and talking about trade negotiations, the big, beautiful bill is on the verge of becoming law. I'm going to say I have no idea what's going to happen. It's such a huge change. It may cause additional deficit. It may cause surplus. I'm saying I have read extensively on this. It's such a big change. That's all I can say. I can't tell you that I believe that there's going to be an increased deficit from this bill. I know that people are saying that. And I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday that certain rural hospitals may close. Yes, they may. That's true. Do you know, Tanner, did you know that in just bulk numbers, the largest employer in our entire economy is, guess what? Healthcare.
Really?
That's correct.
I would have assumed food service. That is crazy.
You know, what would you rather have? A pizza or some drugs? I just put it, because people,
Everybody's got to eat food, David. Not everybody has
I
to
know a
take
lot of
drugs.
people that would pass on food to get high. But anyhow, we don't have time for that today. My point is this. It's the largest segment of our economy. Life expectancies are in decline. We have an extraordinarily unwell population in comparison with other populations. That's data. It's not me saying it. You can go to the CDC. They compare countries. We're not doing very good. Overweight, out of shape, mental illness. I mean, mental illness is profound. There's a drug for everything. People are taking a lot of drugs. We don't have a very well-being society, yet it's care. As I think about it, if it's the biggest part of our economy and we have a very sick population, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It would take a lot of people to take care of a very sick economy, population. I got a great idea. How about we all just get a lot healthier and we'll spend a lot less money on healthcare? Doesn't that sound cool? I hope YouTube doesn't get down on me for that. Do you think they will?
No. You missed some keywords there, so I think we're good.
We're good. All I'm saying is, if you're healthy, you spend less money on healthcare. Wouldn't that be good when we're $37 trillion in debt? Wouldn't that be an admirable goal of self-governance? To become judicious in your food and exercise choices, and you did everything you could to extend your life, compress your morbidity, do everything to be well. I mean, gosh, what a great way to bring our communities together. It's a big part of the military. One of the coolest things about hanging around with military people is they train. I mean, that's the whole deal, right? If you're going to Adam Schwarze. We're going to talk about Adam Schwarze in a minute. He's a SEAL. He still looks like he's in good shape. To me, he's the same guy as Joe Frazier. He's just younger and in better shape. Joe was not a SEAL. Joe was, Joe was Joe Frazier. Adam Schwarze, he still looks like he can get the deal done. People like that. He's trained. That's a good part about military training. People are in better shape. You got to be healthy to go to war, obviously, right? So this big, beautiful bill is going to pass. I can't tell you what's going to happen. And I'm not afraid to say I don't know. Punditry is about always having an answer. Not here at Free People Radio. At Free People Radio, we're going to tell it like it is for us. If we don't know, we're just going to say we don't know. And as long as we're talking about Free People Radio, TireGet.com. I just had a supporter last night talked to me, and he bought 4 Pirelli tires. He told me he didn't want cheap tires. I said, no tires are cheap. He said, nope, I want a name brand tire. And he bought a very premium tire. And he had a good reason for buying it because he lives out in the country. He wanted great winter traction. I had a tire for him. We're putting them on for him. He supported me. I appreciate it. His name is John. Thank you, John. If you happen to hear this podcast, that was super cool. And we get that going every day. That's how we're supporting the growth of the podcast. Or you go to the Free People store and buy whatever you need. These things are super appreciated. Thank you very much. And this ties right into trade because the tires are mostly imported. 75% of tires are imported. And I import tires here at TireGet from guess where? Vietnam. Good morning, Vietnam. And guess what? The reciprocal tariffs are supposed to come back next week. The terrifying reciprocal tariffs. We talked about them. We had a 90-day pause. They're supposed to start again next week. And President Trump was going to use those 90 days to cut a deal. Guess what? President Trump announced a deal with Vietnam yesterday. I have been saying that President Trump is seeking a 25% tax on everything coming in this country. 25%. The deal with Vietnam, 24%. I was off by 1%. Please excuse me. The Vietnamese stock market exploded upwards because the Vietnamese people know, the investors there know, that 24% is not a deal killer. It's going to be business as usual, and we're all going to get back to making money together, partners in progress. But at 24%, I'm collecting a lot of money and paying down that debt. And that's why I'm saying that big, beautiful bill, I just don't know where these Congress people are coming from. We import $4 trillion worth of goods a year on a good year, maybe $3 trillion on a slow year. If you're collecting 25% on $4 trillion, it's $1 trillion, right? Over 10 years, that's $10 trillion. They're saying this bill could run up a $3.5 trillion debt, add to the debt. What about the tariff money? Why is nobody thinking about this tariff money? And here's what's going to happen. We're all going to get used to this. The economy's going to reset, and we're going to have a balanced budget, and the debt's going to be reduced unless we don't go into our neighborhoods and organize them. And by our own laziness, we get a communist president, a socialist president, who then again spends money like crazy, and they spend the money that President Trump is setting up to be new revenue and pay down that debt. I don't want to see that happen. I'm going to work in my neighborhood to see that we keep Republican governance. Here's an interesting one. You'll like this for those of you who want to say that President Trump was lying when he said China was going to pay for it. Japan admitted that its car makers have been paying all of the Trump 25% tariff costs, and trade talks have collapsed with Japan. So there you go. We're going to have to skip some sections that I want to get into and come back to them next Tuesday. That's okay, because I want to read something to set up this conversation about Adam Schwarze in the military and Jewish and Christian Zionism. So I want you to strap in, and I'm going to, in my best style, read quite a long thing. Some of you might recognize it. Maybe a lot of you will not. But it is fundamental to our politics today, and it's occult. And when I say it's occult, I don't mean this passage is occult. Occult just means it's hidden. This is something that's very powerful in our foreign policy and in our public life and in our personal lives. We just don't think about it. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? He said. Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name claiming, I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginnings of the birth pains. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be a great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Messiah," or "There he is," do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, "There he is out in the wilderness," do not go out, or "Here he is in the inner rooms." Do not believe it. For as lightning that comes from east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from no end of heavens to the from one end of heavens to the other. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But about the day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be left in the field, and one will be taken and the other left behind. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill. One will be taken and the other left. Therefore, keep watch, because you don't know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this: if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all of his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's in Matthew. That's what you call a master narrative. That's driving our politics. And we need to understand what's hidden from us, because if we truly want to bring to an end to the endless war, we have to know how we got to where we are and where we are supposed to go. Let's get into this clip, Mr. Tanner.
Okay.
Could you play this first one from 229 to 257, please?
There could be 52 to 45 with about 3 toss-ups. But this race in Minnesota, because Tina Smith is not running for re-election, it moves our leaning Democrat seat to really close to a toss-up. And if Republicans want to spend money on races next year, there's only 3 or 4 races they can spend money on, and this is one of them. This is why this makes this race so close.
That's Jeremy Munson, someone that I've known and worked with. He and another person that I know, Susan Sjogren Smith, have started a new show on KFAN. I think it's called Politics and Pitchforks. Congratulations to both of you on your new business. I wish you all good luck. And as the Godfather said, as long as my interests and your interests do not conflict, there won't be anything but my support and goodwill. Jeremy Munson talked about winning in the next election. And Jeremy, I'm not picking at you because I know people in politics want to win. What are we winning? That's what we're talking about today with these different constituencies. To win and put into place the same white starched shirt wearing, blue suit wearing, red, white, and blue tie wearing, American flag lapin wearing. I went to Harvard. I went to Johns Hopkins. I served in the military. Those people have brought us to where we are. I don't want any more of those people. Now, I'm going to say right now, as we talk about Adam Schwarze, who's running for Senate, this got nothing to do with me working with Royce. If I didn't know Royce, I'd be saying these things. I'm going to take this interview and I'm going to point out to you what I'm hearing. And what I'm hearing Jeremy said is win at all costs. You know, some very famous and powerful American politicians, and we've talked about them, have said, we're better off getting the opponents to win when we have bad candidates on our side, because in electing people that we really are oppressed by, it motivates us to elect someone like Donald Trump. But when we win and put people in power like Lindsey Graham, alleged Republicans, we all go to sleep and just complain. No, we need a change in the country. And that's what the Professor Penn podcast is all about. Let's listen to Adam Schwarze talk about his bio. Please cue up the next one.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Hope to come back again. And I'm excited to the topics you guys have selected for us to talk about this afternoon, especially foreign policy, which is near and dear to my heart because I was a lifelong servant to the American people. I enlisted on my 18th birthday, 2 weeks after 9/11, which happened during my senior year of high school. I did all 5 phases of Operation Iraqi Freedom as an enlisted Marine. Then spent a few years doing some interagency work around the world, mainly with the Department of State. And then I was selected from the top 1% of the enlisted Marine Corps to get a college degree, meritorious commission. In 2012, I commissioned as a United States Naval Special Warfare Officer, or more colloquially known as a Navy SEAL. I did a couple of West Coast deployments. Then in 2016, I screened for an entity that does great power competition, near-peer adversarial missions. No military person will ever say any mission is allowed to fail, but those missions, I would say, are truly no fail because the stakes are so high. And I retired in 2023, and this is now the most important mission I've ever worked on in my entire life.
Okay. I'm not saying that there aren't great military men who have great careers in politics, but if we really want to end the endless war, I'm not taking a chance on military people. And I have great respect for veterans, but we got 20% of the Minnesota Republican Party is veterans. We got 17% of the Congress is veterans. We're always at war. You know, the veteran who was active when he trained me for 22 years, and I worked in his unit, and when somebody tells me they worked interagency for the State Department, that tells me spooky. I could be wrong, Adam. You can come out and correct me, which is fine. But the guy that I worked for used to say, if you're a hammer, every problem is a nail. And a SEAL is the ultimate hammer, and we're supposed to respect that, and I do. I've trained with SEALs. I know who you are. But, uh, I was not a veteran. I never served in the military. I was in a crew of people that had some very high skills, and they went to a certain guy to get those skills, and I happen to be in that group. And I have love for these people. In fact, when I run into one of these people, which I haven't been involved with them for 25 years, it's like we never left each other's side. That's how deep that bonding is. But I wouldn't want any of these people to go to Congress because every problem is a nail if you know how to kill people. And I don't like that. So that's just my opinion. And if you want to vote for that in Minnesota, don't be complaining when the endless wars keep going. You can't complain. If you send warriors to Congress instead of farmers, what do you think's going to prevail? Swords or plowshares? It's very simple, isn't it? Let's listen to the next one.
Said that America First agenda, foreign policy, America First. I serve the American people, and I'm truly also a non-interventionist. That's how I would use to describe my foreign policy and my way. And don't hold it against me, team, but on my way out, I did get a bunch of higher education degrees before they went completely woke and crazy. So I've kind of a unique intersection between, on my way out, I got a master's at Harvard, international relations, and a couple master's certificates also from Harvard in nuclear deterrence, which is very relevant. We talk about the Iran conflict and international security, and then an MBA from Johns Hopkins, and I'm wrapping up a master's in public policy as well. So kind of a unique crossroads intersection between my 9 deployments to over 75 countries, boots on ground, being there, done that, doing some stuff with interagencies, seeing at the strategic level how we interact with other nations. And then at the end, I actually get an academic backstop, which I'm glad I had the real world acumen. So when I'm reading these things and the stories and the actual history and the philosophy that goes into international relations, it was really, kind of a unique intersection of all those things.
I wish
Thank
that.
you. You know what? You could play that over and over again. He's not a non-interventionist. He's been in 75 countries working for the State Department in interagency activities. This is a lie to say that Harvard and Johns Hopkins were not woke in his lifetime. When I went to an East Coast school in 1976, it was woke. Woke to the max. These places have been woke for decades. So, hey, you got to accomplish your mission. Your mission is to get elected to the Senate by any means necessary. To say Harvard is not woke in the last 10 years when you were there, or Johns Hopkins, where they do the bioterrorism wargaming. No, these places are woke. And if you got an education there, hey, I'm not saying, and I'm going to say this again, I don't know Adam. He's welcome to come on the show, Adam. I'm inviting you. Adam might be the most sincere person who extricated himself from the most intense secret society training our military has to offer. That's why he's touting it. SEAL training. I've never had SEAL training, and I don't think I could have made it. I'd have rung the bell, Adam. You're right. What you did was mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. I have all my respect for you. But to get that accomplishment, to wear that, you gave over, brother. And I'm not saying there's some people that don't deprogram themselves, but I remember being traded and I couldn't count back from 10 to 1, and it was hard for me to get mine right. It was hard for me to get out of Orthodox Judaism. It was hard for me to extricate myself from evangelical Christianity. It was hard to get me out of that crew I trained with. I mean, when you're in, you're in. It doesn't work unless you go all in. You see, what he said was, can't fail on these missions. If you don't go all in, you don't make it. So when you go all in, how do you get out? And when I left, the guy I had to go to get out said to me, Penn, you like money too much. I wasn't all in. Okay, it was fenced as a weakness. Actually, it could be a strength. Let's continue. Let's skip this next one on the war in the Ukraine. Let's go to Nikki Haley at 10:59.
Supported Nikki Haley in the last presidential election. Why don't you explain it?
Fake news. No, I'm kidding. No, I did not support or endorse Nikki Haley. My girlfriend, I'll call her my better 7 ace to be generous to me still. Part of her family supported Nikki Haley. I went to a fundraiser. To go to a fundraiser, a lot of times you have to cut a check. So my girlfriend cut a check, and I think they split it with my name and hers, which is, I know I do that actually right now, which is actually interesting because we're not married, so I don't think you're actually supposed to split it if we're not married. But I did not cut a check, and so I showed up on FEC report as writing, donating to Haley, which my girlfriend did, and I went to the fundraiser because my girlfriend's aunt was having it. So I supported my girlfriend in going to the fundraiser. At the fundraiser, the Haley team found out my story as being the Bloomington, Minnesota war hero, Marine Navy SEAL. And then they approached me afterwards and asked if they could put me on their list as people who are in Minnesota who are on their leadership team. I said yes. Didn't I should have probably thought about it better at the time, but yeah, you can use my name. Did not care. But so their team then released something to the Star Tribune saying I was on their leadership team, but I did not fiscally support, did not have a role in her campaign. And what's really important is, words matter. I did not endorse or do anything publicly on any of my socials. I've not cleaned up any of my socials. Everything I've ever done is still out there. So you can see where I've never, promoted her or, gone against the president or anything like that. And to be honest, I met with the President Trump's administration and the NRSC, and that was a question they asked me. And I gave the same exact answer I just gave you and the listeners, and they were supportive in accepting that fact. That's why I'm on track to be endorsed by President Trump, or some of the other people who are looking at this race are persona non grata. So, but thanks for giving me the opportunity to clean that up.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. It obviously convinced Jeremy and Susan. They didn't challenge them. It didn't convince me. And I will say, much to the credit of Kristen Robbins, who is a elected representative here in Minnesota, when asked if she supported Nikki Haley and she was on that same leadership team with Adam Schwarze, she gave a full-throated, yes, I do. So I don't know. I'm not in the guy's head, but it's not a very convincing answer to me. If Nikki Haley came to me, I had dinner with Nikki Haley 2 times. She tried to get me on her team. I was not. Adam, I had dinner with Nikki Haley twice, just sitting down with me and her and a couple other people. I think I was sitting with Norm Coleman at that dinner. They were trying to promote me to be part of her program there. No. No. If you're a hammer, every problem is a nail. Do you want to have farmers in the Congress or SEALs in the Congress, which we're going to talk about in a second? Let's listen on Iran, this next minute clip.
Weapons, and we didn't find any. And for the record, I'm not saying it's apples to apples, because Iran, when I got my master's in nuclear stuff about 5 years ago, we already knew that Iran had low-grade nuclear weapons then. What they really truly lack is the capability to deliver systems. That's where the tech really is changed. But so again, the threat hasn't changed. And I'm just very concerned about the recent escalations.
So I have a quick question. Well, it's probably not a quick question, but so two points, and I'd like you to respond. So NBC News reported that Iran sent a message to President Trump at the G7 summit basically threatening to activate sleeper cells in the U.S. to launch terror attacks, basically, which is they're really good at is the promotion of terrorism. And then coupled that with North Carolina Rep. Brad Knott, he on Thursday had a op-ed in the Daily Caller, and in that he talked about issues related to our southern border and discussed the fact that there were 1,500 Iranians that were caught at the southern border,
Yeah.
and about half of those people were knowingly let into our country
Yeah.
under the Biden administration policies. Not an accident, but it was
Yeah.
they allowed them to be
Yeah.
released. And so I want to say that the threat to America is real.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and when does Iran's acknowledgement of unleashing these sleeper cells as a threat, when does that constitute an act of war against America? They've already sent their people here to launch attacks on us within our own country.
Yeah, so everything you're saying is correct. And if one of those attacks were to happen, that would obviously be a game changer. And then when I talk about us entering into wars through a non-interventionist perspective, that means we're going there. And for those who don't understand, there's these theories of war that have been going back to like Aristotle, but that's what the international courts use now. When we're talking, it's called jus ad bellum and jus ad bello. One is talking about when is it legally permissible to go to war, and the other one is legally talking about how we actually conduct war. Now, if Iran were to do an attack on our homeland, which is very serious, and I want to talk more about that because you're exactly right. The threat is real. Then that changes my calculus on us going to a war and doing offensive actions to defend the United States of America against Iran. But that has not happened. We have had attempts.
That's good. Thank you. When you're a hammer, every problem is a nail. Let's go, and I'm just going to say, and then he breaks back because this is focus group studied. Schwarze goes on at great length, and we don't have the time to cover it, that the greatest threat to the United States is guess what? Guess what? Tanner, what do you think he's going to say the greatest threat to the United States is?
I feel like it's something like Biden's answer. It's going to be white supremacy. White supremacy for 500.
The national debt. You were right on, though. You're right. You're over the target. A focused, studied, grouped answer when President Trump is dealing with the national debt, it's not really going to be a problem. We got this tariff income. That's my opinion. We'll see how it comes out. Hopefully, I'll be alive long enough to get the result with you because this is the numbers, math. But, that's a focus group answer. That's not the greatest threat when the threat's being solved. You can say, oh, the open border. Great. The border's not open anymore. Problem solved. Budget issues being solved. I mean, that's the idea here. Yes. Could this big, beautiful bill have a deficit? Great. Is $10 trillion of tariff revenue going to cover it up? Oh, yes, it is. So let's try to figure out what's going to happen in the future. Let's not be looking in our rearview mirror because it sounds good. It takes a while for people to catch up unless we're working in our neighborhoods. Here's one I like. Play the Lindsey Graham deal. That's a classic.
By both sides, and I think just really it's unfortunate that there's very few leaders, and that's why I'm getting involved. Right? It's there's 7 Navy SEALs now in the House and Senate. It's because we need leaders. We need people that are willing to be uncomfortable, make uncomfortable decisions, and that's what leadership is, truthfully.
Yeah. So, Adam, I mean, for people in my circle of the Republican Party, bottom line, we want to know, are you going to be hanging out with Lindsey Graham or are you going to be hanging out with Rand Paul if you're elected to the U.S. Senate?
On a foreign policy side, I'm certainly very much the Rand Paul. But I'm not in this seat right now where I'm choosing sides. My brand right now is, we have a historic opportunity to fill this U.S. Senate seat in Minnesota. I'm not turning away, Rand Paul. I'm not turning away anybody. I'm not turning away Lindsey Graham. I mean, truthfully, not only do I need every single person across the spectrum of conservative, Republicans, whatever, but I also need to get 50,000 extra votes that we didn't last cycle. So I need to be very pragmatic and just, I love to talk with constitutional conservatives like you guys because, obviously we have some philosophical overlap, but I need to approach this with messaging that's going to appeal to 50,000 people that you probably don't even know what a constitutional conservative is. And so those are the messaging and the issues, and I need to run on to win this. But to kind of go back to your questions.
Minnesotans, if you want to elect a person who's focus grouping his message to get 50,000 votes, This man's going to sell out before he even gets there. You know, this is just stunning to me. And I know he's going to have support. And when we elect people like this, we get what we deserve. You know, he just said everything to you. He's not ruling out anything. He's going to talk to Rand Paul. He's going to talk to Lindsey Graham. Lindsey, I never saw war. I wouldn't support Graham. I'm going to do anything I can to win. It's great to hang out with you constitutional conservatives because I have some overlap with you. What's the part of the Venn diagram that's not overlapping? The man's been in 75 countries. He's educated at Harvard and Johns Hopkins. He's a SEAL. I mean, who do you think this guy really is? And let's let him tell us who he is. Let's play this last one on the SEAL brand.
We haven't been able to raise money nationally. And in order to raise money nationally, you need to go to Washington, D.C. to that swamp and to convince them that Minnesota is in play and you're the right candidate. Because once you do that, then you're able to turn the corner and go to Mar-a-Lago or New Majority in California, or go to Dallas where there's the conservative donor class that are going to put money in our races. That's why the Democrats always win in Minnesota. It's not because we don't have some decent candidates, but we don't have any exciting candidates that have a national brand that can bring in money. And in some of the statewide races, the last two cycles, we've got outspent 33-1. I mean, you can't win. You can have the best candidate with best messaging, but unless you have money to back your messaging, it doesn't go anywhere. And again, that's something that is unique to the SEAL brand. That's why last cycle we did have 5 of 7 SEALs flip Congress, and in the U.S. Senate.
Stop. I hope all you fellow Minnesotans, my fellow citizens, heard what he's doing here. He's running on the SEAL brand, the tip of the spear, the SEAL brand, the life takers, the people that do the most dangerous, dirty work for our military to protect our country, although their wars of discretion. So they're really not protecting our country. They're protecting what? The post-World War II Democrat liberal order, which is coming from Harvard University, where he has a master's degree, and Johns Hopkins, where he studied. This man is a defender of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. And Adam, if you want to come on here and tell me why I'm wrong, and you can convince me that I'm wrong, Royce White aside, convince me that I'm wrong. I'll tell you I'm wrong. But right now, all I hear is a very neophyte baby politician that talks when he should be listening. He told me everything I needed to hear. So thank you, Jeremy and Susan, for a great interview, because you've revealed this man to me. And I hope in these short clips, I've revealed it to all of you. If you want to vote for this, you're going to get war. Thank you.
Want to vote for a man that doesn't even know how to put a headset on? That's driving me nuts. He does not have that headset on, right?
Yes, well, we all have our picadillos, don't we?
Yeah.
Mine is the SEAL brand, and he goes on to brag about that there's a bunch of SEALs in the Congress, and that's Ryan Zinke, Morgan Luttrell, Eli Crane, Derek Van Orden. Hey, the much reviled Dan Crenshaw down in Texas is a SEAL, the guy with the patch, the guy that's working with the World Economic Forum, allegedly, the guy that we love to hate. Yeah, he's a SEAL. And then John McGuire, Virginia. I mean, these people, it almost to me feels like they got a program now. The SEAL brand. Yeah, let's get the SEAL. We got to support this military. There's a bunch of Professor Penns out. There's a bunch of Royce. There's a bunch of people saying we don't need to be doing this anymore. We don't need to have this worldwide empire. We don't need to be spending $2 trillion on the military research. We don't need to be doing this. Hey, we want to get back to having borders, a modest country, a place that's focused on the peace and prosperity of its citizens. We're not going to get there electing people that brag about being SEALs, been in every phase of Iraqi freedom, been in 75 countries, Harvard, Yale, and a SEAL. I mean, he might have deprogrammed himself. I wouldn't bet on it and vote for him. But Adam, if you got the balls to come in here, you're more than welcome to talk to me. And I promise you the same kind of elevated and respectful dialogue that we do every time we have a guest. All right, let's play number 3.
זכור את אשר עשה לך עמלק נצטווינו. אנו זוכרים ואנו נלחמים.
This is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defending Israel's current war on Palestine's Gaza with biblical reasoning. Netanyahu invoked the notion of Amalek in reference to a holy war between good and evil cited in the Torah.
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu knows that he depends heavily on the United States to veto any UN resolutions critical of Israel's behavior. And he needs US military support to counter any threat from Syria or Lebanon.
But it's not just Netanyahu. Such references have been echoing in the US for decades. In 1978, then President Jimmy Carter mentioned that the establishment of Israel was the fulfillment of a biblical prophecy.
It actually goes back to the 1960s. Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan. With the Six-Day War, it was kind of the wake-up call for evangelical, Bible-believing Christians, particularly in America. And it was exploited as the fulfillment of Bible prophecy.
Amid Israel's current bombing campaign in Gaza, the rhetoric has turned more vile. American evangelical pastors who are staunch supporters of Zionism just can't stop repeating biblical prophecies.
Israel, fasten your seatbelt. You're seeing Bible prophecy fulfilled in your lifetime, in real time, before your very eyes.
We shouldn't be shocked and surprised that Satan is still at his same goal, because prophecy talks about how Messiah will come back again.
So, what is Christian Zionism? Christian Zionism is centered around an end-of-the-world interpretation of Christianity, the belief in the return of Jewish people to Israel, leading to the second coming of Jesus Christ. It is one of the common factors that binds Christian Zionists with Zionism.
Christian Zionism predates Jewish Zionism by at least 50 years, and today dominates the Zionist movement at least 10 to 1, probably nearer 20, 30 to 1. For every Jewish Zionist, there are 20 or 30 Christian Zionists. And therefore, Netanyahu knows he needs the Christian, particularly the Christian right in America, Canada, Sweden, Holland, much of Europe, in order to maintain his position and to continue the expansion of the Zionist agenda in Palestine.
And over the decades, this influential movement has dictated US foreign policy when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Remember when former US President Donald Trump made a candid confession during a rally in 2020?
And we moved the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. That's for the evangelicals. You know, it's amazing with that. The evangelicals are more excited about that than Jewish people. It's really, right? It's incredible.
Currently, more than 100 members of the US Congress can be identified as evangelical. Joe Biden, the current US president, has openly identified as a Zionist.
You need not be a Jew to be a Zionist.
There are hundreds of organizations in the United States founded by Christian Zionists that call for public support for the state of Israel, the biggest among them being Christians United for Israel, with 10 million members led by the evangelist John Hagee.
God is getting ready to defend Israel in such a supernatural way. It's going to take the breath out of the lungs of the dictators on planet Earth.
Evangelical support for Israel does not just stop at political lobbying, influencing foreign policy, and mobilizing public opinion, but also fundraising and organizing tours of the occupied West Bank, including funding settlements in the occupied territories, which are illegal under international law. Evangelicals also oppose the two-state solution, believing that dividing the land will incur God's disfavor.
It's Israel's strategy in the occupied territories and in Gaza. It is to depopulate them and steal more and more land. And if you believe that there's going to be a war of Armageddon, that we are on God's side, Israel's on God's side, and anyone who opposes us is on the enemy's side.
And this bias is reflected in the polls, where a majority of Americans are supporting Israel over Palestinians amid the current conflict.
So there is absolutely no justification for the killing of civilians, for genocide, for the kind of saturation bombing we're seeing in Gaza at the moment. And Netanyahu knows that. And so he's pulling out of scripture a verse here, a verse there, to try and placate his main constituency, which is the Christian Zionist movement.
That's a wow, isn't it?
Yeah.
You getting a little bit of an insight into this Christian Zionism now?
I still don't understand it.
I'm
sorry.
We're going to work on it for several episodes. It's obviously a subject that needs real work, real thinking. But that clip had that graphic that over 100 members of the Congress are identified as evangelical. And there's going to be some overlap that's going to reduce the number, but there's 100 ex-military in the Congress, about 20%. So it's going to be less than 200, but out of the 500 people, 535 people that make law, 200 or a little bit less than 200 are either Christian evangelical, possibly then Zionist evangelical, or ex-military, like Adam Schwarze, where you're a hammer. He's still a hammer. That makes every problem a nail. So, 200 out of 535, that lobby is starting out with a pretty good head start, wouldn't you think, on any matters related to the Middle East and foreign policy? And that's Adam Schwarze's most interested. I mean, if Adam came on, I'd ask him, hey, are you born again, Adam? Because what a great way to get elected, to say, I'm born again. And I'm not trying to be rude about it. I don't know. He could be sincerely born again. And I want to just wrap up by saying we're going to go over this until Tanner tells me he gets it. We're going to keep working on it because it's kind of hidden, isn't it, this whole thing?
I understand the motive, but I just don't understand how it all
Well, what do you
ties
think?
in.
What do you think the motive is?
It's just to secure Israel
Why?
because they believe that the Bible has prophesied that that's their land eternally. So they want to secure that. So then we kind of become a pawn.
Wait. I want to help a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
No, they're not that nice. It's really not about the.
I mean, I guess I don't see it as nice. They're using us as pawns.
Well, no. Who's using who? Jews are using the Christians, or the Christians are using the Jews? Because it is a user-usee relationship.
Okay, go
Who's
into
zooming
that.
who? The reason why evangelical Zionism, Christian Zionism, is so supportive of Israel is because they have what's called a literalist interpretation of Scripture. They read it literally.
Mm.
And in Scripture, you can find passages that very clearly say that before Christ returns, the Jews will be ingathered back into Israel. So go back into that previous broadcasts where we were talking about the Balfour Declaration. And I was talking about that the English didn't have a tie to the Holy Land. The Holy Land was controlled by the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, a Muslim empire. The Suez Canal had just been constructed. Israel is just north of that Suez Canal. It's a flank. It's the crossroads of the world, the Middle East. There's oil there, and the British didn't really have much of a claim or much of a tie to Israel. The French did because they were Catholic, and, there was a lot of Catholicism in Israel. The Orthodox Church did, the Russians did, because of the church. But the British, the Anglican Church, they didn't have very much. They didn't have a pretext to go in there as the British Empire because at that point, by the 1800s, you needed a cover story. In the 1600s, you just rolled in, killed everybody, and took the gold. But by the 1800s, people were getting a little bit more liberal. You had to have a reason, like the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. You had to have an order, a reason, a legal framework, because you were selling a legal framework to your citizens. Rule of law, due process. Well, isn't that same rule of law and due process due to the inhabitants of Palestine? Well, let's bring in new inhabitants. Let's rework the area. But that seems a little crude. If we're going to have a mass migration of Jews and they wanted to get out of Europe because they were getting clipped, they wanted to get out of there. How are you going to get them in there under some kind of pretext that works? And, we're talking, a long time ago now. We're talking about the 1850s, 1860s, talking almost 200 years ago. People were a lot more religious then than they are now. So I am not saying that the Protestant evangelicals in Britain that came up with Christian Zionism, which in that clip, it was said it predated Jewish Zionism by 50 years. In other words, Jewish Zionism was a creation of Christian Zionism, that these preachers.
I think I know what I'm getting hung up on.
What are you getting hung up on?
So the Jewish people, it's not that they don't believe that Jesus is a thing. They just don't believe Jesus has come yet.
They don't believe Jesus
is a thing at all.
Well, they believe he's a historical figure like any other historical figure, but they don't believe he was God.
How do I word this? Do they believe, what is the point of them wanting to get the Jewish people back into Israel if they don't believe in Jesus?
Oh, because they have their own eschatology. Jews have their own, all three Abrahamic religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, has what's called an eschatology, an end-time belief. And the Jews also believe that God's coming.
Okay.
Because God came.
That's what I was confused about. Okay, I was just assuming in my head, oh, they don't believe in Jesus, so what's the end goal of trying to get everybody back in Israel?
Well, the Jews want to get into Israel because they believe that God gave Israel to Abraham for all time and all of his descendants. Then we're going to go over next week all these different scriptures because, believe it or not, our foreign policy is being determined by scriptures that were written thousands of years ago. They're not being determined quite the way we think they are, which begs the question, is the prophecy correct, or are we living in a simulation? We have to ask ourselves these kind of questions now. Like, is the Bible the unerring written word of the one true living God? And God wrote the Bible, and therefore it's absolutely flawless? Or did some grifters write it to come up with the religion so they could get a bunch of money and power? We have to ask questions like that of ourselves. And when you're given over, like when I was given over to evangelical healing, and it helped me at such a profound level, and I found Christ through that process, I didn't have any doubt. Because if you have doubt, it doesn't work. Like when you go on a mission as a SEAL, if you have doubt, you're a danger. And if you're going on a mission that there can be no failure, you got to be willing to give your life for that mission. You can't be, you can't be a coward. You got to go for it. That's what the SEAL training is all about, to develop the ability to function at a high level, even when you have fear. That is phenomenal training. When you're an evangelical, you're trained to walk by faith and not by sight, and to put sin underfoot, no matter what the temptations are. That's phenomenal training. And when you're Jewish, you're trained that God left the world unfinished so that human beings had the free will to choose to complete it in a way that was a paradise or a hell. It's our choice. We're going to look at all these different ideas over the next episodes. And why are we going to look at them? Let me be frank. I'm going to look at them. I've been looking at them my whole life. It's getting to be the end of my life. I'm working the back 9. That's kind of me to say. And I want to look at these, did God write the Bible? Or was it divinely inspired, or was it just written by men? What is the relationship between the Catholics and the Protestants? Why are the Protestants so focused on the written word, and why are they completely tied into the Jews with no relationship with the Catholic Church? I mean, these are important political issues that are shaping our times, And there's many other questions of this nature that I want to go through myself and share with you so that we know how we got here. Because we're in a moment of relative peace between being on the precipice of nuclear war, and this is not going away. Remember, it said in that scripture that I read, wars and rumors of wars. So this is a prelude to an ongoing investigation I want to share with you, and I want you to share back with me. Please put in the comments. I'm so interested in what you have to say about this, and I want to thank you for being here tonight for this introduction. And Tanner, I want to thank you for coming in this Thursday morning. It is the 3rd of July tonight. Tomorrow is July 4th. I wish everyone a happy, healthy, and safe holiday weekend. It's my privilege and honor here to work with you. I know these subjects are incendiary. Let us learn how to talk about these things in a way that is respectful and uplifting. And just because there's never been an answer before does not mean there will not be an answer tomorrow, because I do believe in God and his miracles. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.